Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. I'm Jenaé, filling in for Vinnie. And the subject of our investigation is Sarah Boone, a woman accused of killing her boyfriend with a suitcase. The image of Jorge Torres shocked the public. A man zipped up in luggage, unable to get out despite his furious attempts, while his girlfriend recorded it all with her cell phone and taunted him as he struggled to get out. Here's the story. On February 23, 2020, Sarah Boone and her boyfriend, Jorge Torres, were spending an evening together at Sarah's home. The couple had a bit of a tumultuous past. Both had been arrested on domestic violence charges, but they always seemed to get back together. On this night, the two were drinking. But what happened next is inexplicable. Jorge got inside of a suitcase that was then zipped shut. Why and exactly how he got into that suitcase is not 100% clear. But what is clear is that at one point, he wanted to get out. He pleaded with Sarah to open the suitcase, but she refused. Instead, she turned on the video camera on her phone and started to record as Jorge begged for his life. Still, she refused to unzip the suitcase. Then the following morning, she eventually called 911. She said she and Jorge were playing hide and seek, and Jorge ended up in the suitcase. When police responded, they found Jorge dead in that luggage. Sarah has been charged with second-degree murder, and she claims she was the victim. She's claiming battered woman syndrome. What happened inside of that apartment, and why was Jorge in that suitcase? Now, since the beginning, this story has revolved around the suitcase video. It's not every day where we have a case where the defendant filmed this alleged murder that the person who's on the stand, who's going to be testifying but is charged with this murder, second-degree murder. And due to its graphic nature, it was named as one of the two reasons that law enforcement believed that they had probable cause to charge Sarah Boone with second-degree murder. It's likely going to be the hardest obstacle to overcome when convincing the jury of Boone's innocence, which is what the defense is going to try to do. In order to truly understand this case, it is crucial to watch the video. But I do want to warn you before we show it, the footage is graphic and hard to watch.
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
You.
Sarah.
You.
Sarah.
Stupid.
Sarah.
That's my name. Don't wear it up.
Sarah. I can't breathe, babe. Seriously.
Yeah, that's when you do when you choke me.
Sarah. 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 Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
That's on you.
Sarah.
Real or ransom. I want to get video for it extra. Because I got this.
Sarah.
Real or ransom.
Sarah. Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
Oh. That's what I feel like when you drink on me.
Sarah.
You.
Breathe, Sarah.
Yeah. You should probably shut the up.
Sarah.
This is evidence that's never easy to watch, no matter how many times we play it here on this show. And you can hear not only Jorge Torres, his pleas for help. That alone is enough to feel horrifying. But then to see and hear that Sarah is taunting him and not doing anything about those pleas for for help. This jury is going to have to understand what Jorge Torres went through. The prosecution wants to make that clear for this to rise to not manslaughter, but second-degree murder, that she had a reckless disregard and depraved heart for his life. So just how traumatic were Jorge Torres' last moments? That's our question at the top of this hour for the show. And we have experts who are going to talk to us about what it was likely like for this victim. So to help us answer this question, let's bring in our experts. Joining us now, psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Jenaé Lacy is with us, and also joining us, forensic death investigator, professor of forensics at Jacksonville State University, and host of the Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan is here. So Dr. Lacy, let me start with you. We're talking about how mentally and psychologically this could be quite traumatic for someone. What do you think about when you see a video like this?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's heartbreaking to watch, as we know that we are watching the last moments of Jorge's life. But when we consider, especially the reports that are coming out, and you take into context probably what happened to him before she turned on that video. So if there was already some types of discord between the two of them and what happened, that he got into that suitcase, all of these answers that are yet to be answered. But we know that he was suffering. He was pleading for her. He could not breathe. And she's on the other side, taunting him, finding it funny with her slurred speech and bringing back some of the retaliatory statements of things that she feels like that he's done to her, and to sit there and to hear him plead for his life. So we know he was suffering. There probably was a lot of fear, and especially depending on what was happening between the two of them before she actually filmed. All of that stuff really matters to what he probably was experiencing inside that suitcase.
Dr. Joseph Scott Morgan, let me ask you about the physical part of this, because we're understanding what he may have been thinking about, but what was this like for his body to be inside of that luggage?
Well, he's in a contracted position. Let's keep in mind that when they originally released the cause of death, they talked about suffocation. Let's be more specific than that. This is a positional asphyxiation. So what that means is that, as demonstrated in the suitcase in this horrific video, he's in a contracted position. So his arms are pulled in, knees are pulled up. And he's inside of this suitcase that is probably not gas permeable. So that means that you don't have a lot of inflow of oxygen. And so with every respiration that he takes, he is taking in the remainder of the oxygen that is in there. And then he expels the carbon dioxide. And here's one of the things that happens. You develop a condition called respiratory acidosis, which comes along with this idea that your uptake of carbon dioxide is outpacing your uptake of oxygen. It's very painful. He would have gone through these stages of shallow respirations. He still has an awareness. He has enough of awareness where he's begging for his life. You can hear in his voice that he's distressed. And here's one interesting thing that she said that really stuck out to me. She actually said something, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I heard in the recording, he's talking and asking her to let him out. And he's saying, I can't breathe. And what does she say? She says, well, I guess you ought to be quiet. That goes to depraved indifference, perhaps, because she has an understanding the more you talk, the more oxygen you uptake. Therefore, he's on the road to death.
And that's what prosecutors are going to be emphasizing. How much did she understand about the dangerousness of this? And to really understand it, we want to look at this timeline, because we just showed you, it felt like a long time when we watched that clip, but it was 2 minutes long. That's not anywhere close to how long he was inside of that suitcase. So based on the documents that we have looked over in this case, we were able to put together these key times. And that includes, we have the arrest affidavit. It states that the first video where she began recording was at 11:12 p.m. And then she decides to go upstairs a little over an hour later and fell asleep after about 30 minutes. The following day, she woke up at 11 a.m. and realized that George was still in the suitcase. So if what Sarah Boone said, if she was truthful in her retelling of the events, George would have been in that suitcase for 11 hours and 48 minutes at the very least. Dr. Lacey, even if he had survived this, what would that kind of an experience be like for someone who, after all of those hours, had been in a situation of being trapped?
Well, not to mention the physical implications, but when we think about the psychological implications, right, there's going to be a lot of PTSD, right, the claustrophobia, a lot of different things that he probably would have gone through, and probably the state of their toxic relationship. All of these things, I mean, it takes him to this edge where she's entrapping him and allowing him to suffer and to beg, and then for him to potentially have survived that, there would probably been a lot of implications to him having PTSD, anxiety, depression, probably a lot of revenge thoughts around this relationship. So we can only imagine what he was thinking in those final moments, because we can hear him suffering and her on the other side of that. To know that someone that you loved has the potential to let you free and to not allow you to suffer, and then to hear her on the other side, I can imagine was very, very difficult for him.
We've got a bit from the autopsy report that lets us know the condition of his body. According to that autopsy, he had long nail scratches to his mid-upper back, a large nail scratch to the back of his neck, contusions to his left shoulder, left skull, and forehead contusions considered to be blunt force trauma. He also had a cut near his lip that was busted. Joseph, just talk to me about what you think the cause of those injuries were. I mean, could he have gotten those just from being inside of the suitcase? Because Sarah Boone told police she was shocked that he had those injuries and said to police, "You don't think that was me, do you?"
Well, that'd be really interesting. You know, when they finally addressed her and began to examine her at the scene and chat with her, I'd really wonder if she had any injuries on her. Again, if he's, say, for instance, if he has any agent on board where he could be compromised, his ability to fend for himself, if he was intoxicated at any level, any drugs on board, she may have been struggling to get him in there, and she's trying to subdue him. That's a possibility. Now, could he have generated those injuries inside of that suitcase just by flailing about in there? I suppose that he could. I'd be fascinated to know what his actual position was inside of the suitcase relative to the floor. And if you could see that image once more of that suitcase, when you see it, I find it fascinating that as you're looking at it, the zipper side of that suitcase is actually down, touching the ground. It's not up. So this thing had to have been moved. The big question here scientifically is, could he have leveraged this thing enough just through the motions of his body to flip it over and it wind up like that? Or did she place him in there and then flip the suitcase so he would not have an opportunity to get out of this thing, perhaps, because he's so disoriented?
Investigators do believe that she was involved in pushing that suitcase over. So the question is, will that be something that she admits to at any point in this trial? We are going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. Our guests are staying with us. We're attempting to answer our next question in this investigation. Just how intoxicated was Sarah Boone when this happened?
You told us you weren't drunk.
No, I was not drunk.
Right.
I was not drunk.
Are you incapable of telling the truth, Brian?
On the premiere of Interview with a Killer.
The problem is people don't believe me.
A gruesome torture caught on camera.
You told the police that you shot her because you wanted a Hollywood moment.
The monster behind the memory card murders is speaking out.
That sounds like a guilty man who's coming clean.
Interview with a Killer. Series premiere Sunday, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
I was in shock. I was traumatized by the situation, and then trying to focus on everything that was going on at my home. I was hungover. I was still, I believe, intoxicated to a degree.
That was Sarah Boone on the stand during a previous hearing in her murder trial. She was describing her state of mind during her police interview the morning of George Torres' death. She claimed she was hungover, possibly still intoxicated from the night before. And it's a large point of contention in this case because according to prosecutors, one of the many ways her story is consistent is about whether or not she was intoxicated. Take a listen to how she described her drinking that night in her police interview.
You told me but you told me on recording, like, that you were not drunk, he was not drunk, you guys were having a good time.
I can't get drunk. Number one, I do not want to get drunk. I don't like being non-compos mentis, having my wits about myself. I don't like feeling out of control. So
I'm just saying, you're making it sound like he's a raging alcoholic today, and yesterday I was kind of asking you those questions, and you're like a little defensive, like, no, we're not alcoholics.
I'm not.
We are not, you know. But you guys were both sober on Sunday, to your knowledge, because when I said you went and passed out, you were like, no, I didn't pass out, I just fell asleep. So now it's kind of like, what is it? Were you guys drinking and it got out of hand and it got physical?
No.
Or is it?
Sunday was one of the better days that we have had in quite some time.
So where were you guys at on drunkenness, not drunkenness on Sunday? You told us you weren't drunk.
No, I was not drunk.
Right.
I was not drunk.
So Sarah Boone has admitted to drinking alcohol, but she repeatedly has affirmed that she wasn't drunk. So that brings us to our next question. Was Sarah Boone intoxicated when this happened, when George Torres was inside of that suitcase? Let's bring back in our guest, still with us, psychotherapist Dr. Jenaé Lacey and forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan. Dr. Lacey, you heard Sarah Boone there saying, first, I can't get drunk, and then she says, I won't let myself get drunk. What is that saying to you?
When I hear statements like that, Julie, I often think about clients that we work with that either have some level of alcohol abuse to alcohol dependence. So when there is some level of struggle, then there's also a huge window of denial. So my mind goes to, with that defensiveness, I'm wondering what her history of alcohol was. But when we're watching the video and we're hearing the slurred speech, and we're also potentially hearing the executive functioning going offline, so to speak, and not really thinking through the consequences of her behavior, right? Some of these things are consistent with someone that is at least abusing alcohol, where they're not being consistent with thinking through with their executive functioning, thinking through consequences, and we're hearing her slurred speech. So there would be some assumptions based off of what we see and what we know, that there is some level of being influenced by alcohol consumption.
And perhaps what we hear in that video, Joseph, we are hearing her words. It sounds like there's a slur. What are some of the steps that would have been taken by authorities if they would have been able to determine her level of intoxication, knowing that this was the morning after?
Well, if this had been interdicted immediately, I would think they could have perhaps have done a blood draw. But in that same vein, I got to tell you this. And look, I understand that this was not a traffic stop, but I can tell you this: if she had been operating a motor vehicle and police pulled her over, she rolled down the window to communicate with a police officer, and she was speaking like that with that slurring going on, guess what's going to happen? They're going to take her out of that vehicle, and they're going to subject her to a field sobriety test, because that in and of itself, just the slurring of the speech, would be enough for them to have reason to do that. And it's fascinating here for me just watching this, because you have this almost in real time, and she's recording herself doing this, and it kind of reaches out into the realm of the absurd. Where she's saying definitively, I wasn't drunk, I can't get drunk, but yet you have her here where her ability to vocalize things is compromised. And so my next question would be, well, are you physically impaired some way? Are you on some kind of medication? Because, this just doesn't sound like someone that has their wits about them.
So Dr. Lacey, she's saying that she can't get drunk, even though we know years after this, her attorneys are going to put down on the record that one of her defenses is voluntary intoxication, hoping to save her life, hoping to get a lesser charge in this case, but it doesn't seem like she wants to admit that. What do you think is the reason behind that? Is there some kind of shame there that she does not want to admit to authorities?
Well, when I hear people say statements like we heard Sarah saying that she can't get drunk, there's usually some context around that, meaning that in my experience, usually when there's some level of those statements, it's because there's some type of history, or people will say, can't get drunk because of this. I can't get drunk because I don't remember things. I can't get drunk because I tend to say things, right? There's usually some type of following statement that people will make, at least in the counseling realm. So when I'm hearing that statement on the video, I would be wondering what her context is, and that would be dealing with her history. Does she black out? Does she normally get violent? Does she say things that she tends to regret, right? So usually when people try to be defensive because they don't want to allow themselves to consume a certain level of alcohol, there's usually because there's a reason behind that, and that reason is something that they don't want to show up in their life. So that is where I would imagine there's some context there to that statement for her and her history.
Joseph, I only have 10 seconds. Do you think a jury will think she was intoxicated?
Yes, just hearing that, hearing the recording, yes, I think that they probably would.
That's all the time that we have. Thank you so much to our guests, Dr. Jenaé Lacey and Joseph Scott Morgan, for lending your expertise. We know your time is valuable. I'm Julia Jenaé. We're going to keep digging for answers as the investigation continues. Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. I'm Julia Jenaé, filling in for Vinnie as we continue our investigation into Sarah Boone, a Florida woman accused of killing her boyfriend with a suitcase. She's charged with second-degree murder, but she has firmly maintained her innocence for years, going through 8 attorneys and turning down plea deals for a lighter sentence. She says this was an accident and not at all her fault. Here's the story. Sarah Boone and Jorge Torres were involved in an on-again, off-again, tumultuous relationship filled with accusations of cheating and abuse. But on February 23rd, 2020, Sarah and Jorge were together at her home, spending some time together and drinking. But at some point that night, for some reason, Jorge ended up locked in a suitcase while Sarah taunted him as she recorded video with her phone. Jorge tragically died that night, and now Sarah is facing murder charges. There are still many lingering questions in this case about their relationship and exactly why Sarah didn't open up that suitcase and let Jorge out. Now, since the beginning of this case, many of our legal experts have struggled to come up with an effective defense for Sarah Boone in their analysis of this case, especially after seeing that notorious video discovered on her phone. So when Boone landed her 9th attorney, and it seemed like he was the only one who would finally see this case through to the end, we were all wondering what would be his strategy. Then, out of the blue, attorney James Owens made it known he was going to be trying to defend Boone at her trial. The declaration that not only surprised us, but the judge as well. Take a look.
Judge, the state doesn't know what happened the 2 minutes prior, or the minutes leading up to, the time leading up to the 2-minute video. The state doesn't know what happened after the 2-minute video. Only Sarah Boone can testify to that. That's for her to testify to.
Florida, the appellant has not cited, nor is our research located, any Florida case holding that evidence of battered spouse syndrome is admissible where the defendant claims accident rather than self-defense.
Who claims accident?
Are you claiming self-defense?
Yes.
Well, that's the first time that I've heard that.
Judge, I just mentioned it a while ago.
The word self-defense never came out of your mouth.
Judge,
words that you believe that the state's position is, what you believe that they're going to try to establish, that we don't know what happened before and after that video. The words self-defense have never been uttered this afternoon.
Judge, for the record, we're claiming self-defense. We're utilizing the battered spouse syndrome in conjunction with that defense.
Okay. All right.
Not accident, as they want to allege.
Okay.
This declaration transformed how things develop inside of that courtroom now. So after hearing James Owens' plan for Boone's defense, we're left with one looming question, and it's a big one. We're asking our experts, is battered partner syndrome in this case a legitimate defense for Sarah Boone? And to answer that, let's bring in our guests who are standing by. Joining us, the state attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, Dave Ehrenberg. Also joining us, the co-host of the very popular Surviving the Survivor podcast, Joel Waldman, joins us on the phone. Dave, let me start with you. This was a moment inside of the courtroom because we didn't expect that this is what she was going to be arguing. We had seen other filings saying voluntary intoxication, perhaps accident, but this is a difficult defense, is it not?
It is, Julia, but this is what happens when you have a client who demands things go her way. That's why she's on her 9th lawyer. She's had irreconcilable differences with the other lawyers because she wants to prove her innocence. Not that she's lesser culpable of manslaughter instead of murder. No, she wants to say she's innocent by way of self-defense. It means she's going to have to testify. But even if you claim this battered spouse defense, it means that you still have to show that you were in threat of your life or at least great bodily harm. Well, she was the one in control here. She was the one taunting the guy. He was stuck in a suitcase. He wasn't a threat to her at the time. And if she really was threatened by him, if she really was that scared of him, why are you playing a game of drunken hide and seek with him? So none of the facts seem to justify her defense.
Joel, you have been inside of the courtroom for arguments leading up to what is going to be this huge trial. What has been the conversation about battered spouse syndrome and whether they can even present it to the jury, because that hasn't happened yet?
Good evening, Julia, and I apologize that you're not seeing me on camera, but I have a face for radio. Better off that you are looking at Dave. I will fix the problem.
That's fine for now, Joel.
To answer your question succinctly, you know, people across the board just think it's absolutely, for lack of a better word, insane. I've talked to a lot of smart legal minds like Dave and criminal defense attorneys, one in particular who just won a battered spouse case out of Palm Beach County, I believe it was, where Dave is. Her name is Jessica Mashali, an attorney, and she said, look, Sarah Boone does not exhibit any of the traits of a battered spouse, absolutely none. She said to me, why don't they just say it was an accident? And you just heard in that soundbite you played that they don't plan on doing that. Why don't they just say that she was drinking, which she was, she passed out, she fell asleep, and next thing you know, she woke up and Jorge Torres was no longer with us. It's obviously a horrible tragedy. But then you got the fact that she also videotaped all of this, which police have, and that videotape, I don't think any jury will be able to get around that.
Yeah, the prosecution does not want this defense coming in. Here's a listen to what they had to say in trying to get the judge to keep it out as an option.
If this is what she says, does this amount to what they are asking for legally? And it's the state's position under the case law that no, because under her statements that she gave to the experts, there was no overt act taken by the decedent on that day. There was no overt action. And that's what's required under the law to trigger her response of acting in self-defense. They're laughing. It's all fun and games still. There's still no overt act taken by the decedent during this entire calendar day to put anybody in reasonable fear, objectively reasonable in fear of imminent harm, of great bodily harm or death. And it's only when he begins to say, after she has zipped him up into the suitcase, again, she is saying that she did not have malintent at that time. When he starts to say, I cannot breathe, now she describes to the doctors that she does have bad intent. And she wants him to feel what she has felt in the past. She gets angry, is her description. She shakes the suitcase, she beats it, it falls over, it flips over, he sticks his fingertips out, she hits him with a bat. So she's now the initial aggressor, and we'll discuss jury instructions as we get closer, but she's the initial aggressor, and she has now committed forcible felonies, aggravated assault, and aggravated battery, stating that I only intended to keep him in there for a couple of minutes. I believed he could get out. She never perceived, according to her, that he would die or face great bodily harm. And she just goes upstairs knowing now he's mad because she won't let him out. Now, because of the actions she took as the initial aggressor, she is facing death or great bodily harm from the decedent if he gets out, and she completely expects him to get out because her testimony is that he could get 2 fingertips out of the zipper. So, Your Honor, under the law, the state understands. We are deeply, deeply thoughtful about this request because of the risk of error, but this is just one of those cases, like the cases the state cited. There is no self-defense if that is what her testimony is.
So, Dave Ehrenberg, you hear there the prosecution says you still need an overt act for battered partner defense to work. Talk to us about the difference between battered spouse and self-defense when you don't have to necessarily show a cycle of abuse.
Yes, and by the way, I thought Joel Wallman did a great job, even without video. He's an A-list guest, definitely. And I thought that prosecutor was right on the money. You know, battered spouse defense is not a substitute for self-defense. You still have to show that you are in reasonable fear of your life, and it's an imminent threat. So if she says that, well, he poked his fingers out and he was trying to grab at me and choke me, that would be something. That would be an overt act. But he didn't. He was just trying to get out of the suitcase, and she was the one in control. She was the one taunting him, and the jurors are going to hate this person, this defendant, because she lied to police. She was the aggressor the whole time, and now she's trying to cloak her whole case on this defense that is really not applicable to her. She would have been better served just saying that I got drunk, I didn't mean for this to happen, it's an accident, give me manslaughter, lesser offense, I'll be out in 13 years. But no, she insists on being acquitted, and she's not going to be.
Oh, she's been offered that lighter sentence. She's turned it down. Joel, tell me about what you've been hearing. You're there on the ground, but you're also talking to viewers all the time of your podcast about this case. How shocked are people that she turned down a deal which could let her out in the next 8 years or so?
I mean, there's one word, incredulous. People cannot believe it. You know, she served, people don't realize she's been sitting in jail since 2020. She served over 4 years in jail and was offered a plea deal, and people are upset that she was actually offered this deal. She could have been out with time served in something like 8+ years. You could tell that her defense attorney, by the way, this is her 9th defense attorney. His name is James Owens. He said today in court he only got the case 45 days ago. You could tell he was trying to steer her towards taking the appeal, but by all accounts, she's an absolute control freak, and she thinks she is smarter than everyone in the room. If you watch the police interviews, that is abundantly apparent. And because of this, she's going to go to trial. And, you know, the betting odds are against her. Most people think she's going to get convicted with a harsh sentence. So I just don't know what she's thinking here.
And Dave, you're there in Florida. You are a prosecutor, a state attorney there in Florida. So I'm really trying to dig into battered woman syndrome and how we know that it is a different perception in terms of it's from the perception of that woman who is in this situation. And correct me if I'm wrong, but should we or should the judge be looking more at how Sarah Boone says this all went down? Because she said that she had to hit his fingers with a bat to keep him from coming out of this suitcase. So if she was in fear for her life at the time, she's got this cycle of abuse that she is claiming, and there's some evidence to back it up based on the arrest reports where both of them have been arrested for domestic violence. A lot of those charges didn't stick. But should there be more emphasis on what Sarah Boone was feeling? There's a look at the filing where the defendant said to her psychiatry evaluator, who said that she shook the suitcase, she lost control, the suitcase flipped, and then she hit his fingertips with that baseball bat that was in the room. Is that not enough?
No, because although you do look at it through the eyes of the person claiming battered spouse syndrome, it's got to be filtered through the prism of reasonableness. Was it reasonable for her to have a fear of her life? The guy was stuck in a suitcase. She was in control. And the little part that he was able to put his fingers out to try to get himself out, and then she had a bat, a weapon. He didn't have a weapon. He was pleading for his life. She was out there taunting him, saying, yeah, that's my name, Sarah, don't wear it out, which is like an 80s line. Shame on her for that. So no, it's not reasonable, and that's the problem here. And one other thing, I know you call it battered women syndrome. In recent years, because any gender could take use of this, it's now called battered spouse syndrome, but it is the same thing. You do look at it through the person's eyes, but it's got to be filtered through the prism of reasonableness.
We are going to keep talking about this case. Our guests are staying with us. Don't go anywhere. We have our next question that we're going to pose in this investigation into Sarah Boone's case. What is it going to be like when she takes the stand?
The state doesn't know what happened after the 2-minute video. Only Sarah Boone can testify to that.
One of the most successful true crime TV shows ever.
This is crazy.
Now has a new home on America's original true crime obsession, 48 Hours on Court TV. Coming up next on Court TV.
Sarah Boone is charged with second-degree murder after her boyfriend suffocated inside of a suitcase.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
I thought he was okay.
The Suitcase Murder Trial. Live coverage weekdays, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
I tried giving her CPR. The problem is I fell asleep. I fell asleep.
When did you do CPR?
This morning, when I found it.
Before you called?
Yes!
1 o'clock right now.
I tried. I was awake, but I actually got out of the bed at like 12:30ish, whatever. So I came downstairs, and I was like, oh, he's in the suitcase still.
Throughout the pretrial hearings in this case, over and over again, we've heard a common theme, and it has to do with Boone's upcoming trial. Take a look.
The state doesn't know what happened after the 2-minute video. Only Sarah Boone can testify to that.
This evidence can only come from her. So she should have to testify.
What does Ms. Boone, in this case, testifies to on the stand?
If the defendant's going to have to testify in a narrative form, if she's going to come in and testify 100% differently than how she gave statements to law enforcement, I believe the crux of that issue is going to revolve around her having to testify in the form of a narrative given her prior statements.
That was defense attorney after defense attorney making it seem like it's almost inevitable at this point that she is going to be testifying. So we are left with one final question, and that is, what is she going to be like on the stand? After everything we've heard from Sarah Boone, let's bring back in our guest. Still with us, State Attorney for Palm Beach County, Dave Ehrenberg, and on the phone, co-host of Surviving the Survivor podcast, Joel Waldman is with us. Joel, let me start with you. What do you think Sarah Boone will be like on the stand? You've seen her in court, and sometimes she's had to speak up and talk directly to the judge.
Yeah, look, I don't want to make light of this. If you've seen the suitcase video, as it is now known, it's horrific. Jorge Torres is in there. He is suffering. But she is going to be wild on the stand, and it's going to make for must-see TV. And I hate to minimize, someone's loss by saying that, but it is true. I was probably 8 feet away from her today. She's just nonstop fidgeting. She's, just constantly in motion. And her stories are very inconsistent. 1 minute she was saying she was drinking, the next she's not drinking. 1 minute she's saying everything was fine between her and Jorge Torres. the next minute everything was not fine. She can't keep a story straight, and this is a very seasoned prosecutor, Will J., and he is going to trip her up, and she is going to suffer, in my opinion, as a result of testifying, which I think there is no way out of for her.
Dave Ehrenberg, this testimony in the narrative style, what is that for in this case? We've seen it in other cases, but it's usually when a defendant is either representing themselves or they told their lawyer something they shouldn't have.
Yeah, that's generally what happens. That's what that case was about in Las Vegas, the Tellis case. We saw it there because the guy was a liar and the lawyer didn't want to be part of it. And I think that when you have so many contradictions, the lawyer doesn't want to suborn perjury, so they just put the defendant on the stand and say, all right, tell your story. And this also shows you that the defendant is insisting on this defense and is insisting on taking the stand and telling her story, looking like it's against the wishes of her lawyer, her ninth lawyer, as Joel correctly put it. So it will be must-see TV. The jurors are going to hate her. She is someone who's already unlikable without saying a word at the table by fidgeting and talking her lawyer's ear off, passing him notes, and then making demands like Pop-Tarts. She has the diet of a school child. So I think that this is not going to go well for her. She should have listened to her lawyers, but this is how she got to where she is.
So this narrative style means her attorneys aren't going to be asking her any questions. Joel, when this starts, you've seen her police interviews. You've seen how she seemed to just stick to, how could you believe this was intentional? I didn't do this intentionally. What do you think she's going to be like in terms of staying on task on the stand?
A disaster. You know, I'm no psychologist, but if I had to diagnose her, I would definitely put ADHD in there. And again, I am not a therapist of any kind, but my parents are and were, and you know, I'm just observing her in court, and Dave is 100% right. She's spending the entire time either taking notes or talking her lawyer's ear off. Yesterday, she kind of swung around and was whispering back and forth from a distance of probably 15 feet because he was in the gallery, but she was talking to the private investigator, and she just cannot seem to keep a focus. And so I think it's going to be really hard. That's going to translate in terms of not being able to tell a story because of this lack of focus. She's going to be all over the place. And again, this prosecutor, Will J., he has been around since the 90s. He's got a lot of experience, and I believe he's going to run circles around her.
Dave, what do you think about this element of her believing, it seems firmly, that this was not intentional, therefore I should not even be arrested? The detective said that, hey, even if it's not intentional, that doesn't mean you didn't do intentional acts that led to this, and the judge is going to keep that part of the interrogation out so that the jury doesn't get confused by that being a legal conclusion. Your thoughts on if that was the right move?
Yeah, it's the right move. The jury's going to see her lie on camera where she said, I fell asleep. And then all of a sudden, the videos are discovered on her cell phone, and she looks not only like a liar, but a murderer. And so when she tries to have all these different explanations, yeah, it's good that the court is going to take control and limit the kind of defenses and the kind of things she could say, because, you know, you don't want this to become a circus. It's already going to be a circus if she's allowed to testify in the narrative. She is not going to make a good witness, but at least you've got a judge who has control over his courtroom.
Absolutely. It is going to be a trial that we will be watching every second of. Dave Ehrenberg and Joel Waldman, thank you so much for being with us. We certainly appreciate your analysis and expertise. Now, Sarah Boone's fate in this case, it's going to soon be in the hands of the jury. They're going to decide what happened to Jorge Torres. Was it murder? They'll decide if he was a victim or if she was the victim that night. Looking at the facts and the law is what they are going to be using. Now, she's innocent until proven guilty. It's her right to testify, her right to remain silent. But the fact that she is exercising her right to counsel and now has an attorney rather than representing herself means a better chance at fair administration of justice, no matter what side you're on in this case. I'm Julia Jenaé. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.